Edgy media used to be a counterculture thing that challenged the status quo and settled in everyone's minds. Nowadays, it feels like a cop-out when a writer can't think of anything interesting to say. The worst part is critiquing it automatically makes you soft, or a snowflake. This problem media does not magically disappear when you read comics. There are plenty, and I mean plenty, of writers whose only personality trait is saying a lot of curse words and being raw and quote-unquote real. Now, some of the writers I want to go over are ones I'm actually huge fans of. However, some I think are either overrated or just plain bad. Without further ado, let's get into some of the edgiest writers in comics. Tom fucking King, which is his legal name. Now, I'm a Tom King fan, and with him being a part of the new DCU, picked by James Gunn himself, I want to talk about something I hope changes when they're adapting his books, that obviously being the cursing. Tom, for some reason, believes that saying the word fuck 100 times an issue slightly makes it more badass. I used to think that too when I was 12. Now, as an adult, I think someone relying on any word too much is annoying, especially when it's not just one character, but almost every auxiliary character. This becomes such an irritating thing in his longer runs as well. Right now, he's writing Penguin and just finished Danger Street. Both have this problem. Danger Street especially had this issue of replacing the audience ease of understanding with more shock factor. Black Label doesn't mean you shove as much South Park potty humor as possible, while skipping out on explaining what's going on. Look at Peacemaker Tries Hard. It's funny and crass, but tastefully crass, and also has a very understandable story. In Danger Street, he mixes over-the-top analogies and beating around the bush way of explaining the plot with a group of kids who cannot stop being a poor imitation of Cartman. Now, I could get into the older characters of that story, and even Penguin to some extent, but a lot of it I just repeat when talking about his Batman run. The most divided DC fans have ever been. Personally, I enjoyed it overall, but it has some of the hallmark issues with King's writings, namely an obsession with characters who are either depressed or traumatized. In Strange Adventures, I had no connection to Adam Strange, so I didn't mind it there. However, King likes to completely change characters to be the subject of his preacher's sermon. There's always this character who monologues in a way that doesn't make any sense, but sounds cool and edgy, because if you actually have the right characters in a consistent way, you can't have everyone be your PSA on getting therapy and choosing not to be sad. This is incredibly forced in Batman, where you have a central theme in his long, tedious run being Batman cannot be Batman if he is happy, which is total horseshit. The OG Batman got Robin a year later and wasn't afraid to smile or laugh, nor was his other iterations. Being depressed doesn't give you some superpower, it just makes you inept by dulling senses and reserving energy. Ultimately, this becomes even more insulting when you realize Tom is forced to use Bruce as he is in the modern era, the super dad who has adopted half of Gotham. How the hell can Bruce still be a gloomy, moody, depressed guy while having such a large family and a long history of learning and growing, which to King's credit he does learn, or he has relearned how to properly communicate with family and get your emotional needs met. My issue is that he does it with Selina, the most toxic couple in DC. They are an inverse Stick and Barbara, who are either bickering or doing this corny baby talk. I can look past all of this, but my biggest gripe with Tom's edgy Batman run is that in order for Bruce to go through all this change, they killed my boy Alfred. Oh my god, I mean, was that needed? What's strange is Nightwing's issues with the death of Alfred felt so much warmer and had a far greater emotional impact on me. In the main Batman run, Alfred's death was so jarring and gross, I really did not like it at all. Nightwing's comics have a warmth to them that feel more authentic to a man who raised both Dick and Bruce, while King uses his corpse as a catalyst towards the end, which did make for a satisfying conclusion, but it definitely could have been handled better. Now, it's not the worst thing, as other creators like to just create Alfred for a far bigger payoff, but it definitely does not measure up to who I'm about to talk about next. If you saw a title, this guy should have popped into your mind. He is the king of bad, edgy media, somehow spawning one of the best TV adaptations, but unfortunately that resulted in more people being subjected to this. Outside of the crude and seemingly incomplete characters in the boys' comics, the cast feels like two middle schoolers writing a parody with the nastiest things they can think of. None of it is interesting, and all of it is just pointless filth. Parodies that ask what if the good guys were bad have been done better before, and oftentimes by DC and Marvel. They enlist the help of actual writers who want to explore morality and justice, the ideas of what a life is worth, and what the cost of peace is. In this book, it's just Garth Ennis without an editor who can oversee production and say, hey man, don't do that. Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. That's always my problem with edgelords, is like they're obsessed with the idea of what they're capable of, but only asking themselves, should I do this? Like a mature adult would. Because sure, you can use any iconography you want in your comics, but do you really need to use the 4-pronged Yahtzee icon in your comic? It would probably alienate a lot of potential fans, even if they know you mean well. Being considerate to your audience doesn't mean you have to completely pander to them. It's not either or, it's balance, which The Boys show in the new spin-off has done really well, mixing in out their ideas with core character moments and a very interesting plot. Now I do want to say that Garth isn't all bad, he has a lot of cool moments and ideas, but for every step forward it's a few more behind. He was clearly impassioned by the superhero status quo of comics and wanted to do a teardown of media manipulation, which surprisingly really made this age in some sections like a fine wine when looking at the MCU and its ties to government propaganda. However, that is another video entirely. Let me talk about creator, which will definitely get all my 400 subs to unsubscribe immediately. Frank Miller's Dark Knight is undoubtedly very important. It's a very important comic that's done a lot for the industry. That doesn't mean it's good. Furthermore, it has spawned a lot of deconstruction arcs which have grown tiresome. I understand that in the past, in 1986, it was a very new topic. The 24 Hours news cycle being used to discuss Batman as a character, mirroring the rise of debate media and constant news, the over-militarization of police and complacent officials. A lot of it was the first time these things were introduced to readers. This comic came out when people were getting a little tired of the complacent comics wherein the overly convoluted plots, the goofy villains, the downright cartoonish resolutions. While we look back and appreciate our roots, people wanted more, and this comic gave them that. I can appreciate all of this, but it doesn't change the fact that Frank Miller's Batman is a cranky old man who does not truly embody the Batman spirit I know and love. What's worse is the commentary is so bitter and so nasty, especially when we're introduced to Superman, which is where I early judge a writer's quality based on their understanding of supes, and Frank Miller has failed miserably. Superman is someone who fights for the love of humanity. In this comic, he is simply a tool. Frank can only see the power Superman wields and not the beautiful soul that resides in the body. This is something that has helped propel this book to stardom, while also delving into a then non-existent but now overly prevalent problem with Batman writers. That is the one-man army Batman, the tank Batman, the Mega Batman. He is completely stripped of his detective skills. No more is he someone who fights to protect the innocent. He is simply a bunch of gadgets and big-ass tanks. This inspired the god-awful Dark Knight trilogy, which follows a character who says he's Batman, but honestly feels more like an evil goth Tony Stark. But again, this gave something new to readers. My issue with this comic run in its entirety is at the end of this book it culminated into a fight between two quote-unquote lifelong friends, with Batman at times seriously aiming to kill Clark with kryptonite. I mean, Bruce in this book is a psychotic, violent warlord, not a hero and not a vigilante. Superman is a government lackey who wants order above all, and feels more like a Zoro from One Piece when he should be more like Luffy. How could these two men mourn for each other? What right does Clark have to say, don't touch him at the end here? What love is present? That gaping hole of humanity in these so-called heroes echoes on in future comics where people pick up an issue just to read their guy pulverizing a goon to the point of comatose. I mean, the brutal nature of this wave of edgy comics all came from Miller, and he has some good stuff here and there, but ultimately his shining star of a series is an overly violent, bitter, bleak, and downright sad take on what I consider to be one of the most hopeful genres in print media. In conclusion, I think we need a better balance between edge and heart. Not all comics need to be sappy love stories, but they don't all need to be Batman getting as close to killing people as possible. I think we as a society are moving from ultra-violence and moving towards a more well-rounded approach to stories. It needs to be real, not too bitter, not too sappy, just right. I think Mark Waid really understands this balance the best. He has villains with reasonable motivations, but are still cruel enough to feel like villains, and heroes who want to do good simply because they feel the drive to do that, not for any power fantasy. Just because you feel depressed or shitty or bitter or angry doesn't mean Batman has to. I want my guy to be happier, along with my soups and the rest of them. If you disagree with me, I understand, but let's keep it civil in the comments. I'll be there. Peace.